She wasn't on the guest list. She wasn't welcome. And yet, she walked into her brother's wedding wearing a white dress as if it were her day. But before that moment, before the past, before the silence, before the damage, there was a text message. Just a single message, enough to make one man pack his bags, enough to almost end 6 years of love. Evan met Luca at an open studio night in Vermont. One worked with concrete and steel, the other molded clay with bare hands. Their worlds should have stayed apart, but they didn't. They collided gently, quietly, and deeply. For years, they built a home together, shared a business, survived illness and silence from a few relatives who still whispered behind closed doors. But not Miranda. Miranda was Evan's older sister. She used to babysit him, braid his hair when they played pretend, and walk him to school. She was there through his first heartbreak. She defended him when he came out. At least, she did at first. But when Evan fell in love with Luca, something in her shifted. She smiled politely, laughed in all the right places, sent birthday cards. But her eyes never softened toward Luca. Her words never quite reached the heart of things. And Luca felt it, that invisible cold wall only he could see. Still, he never said a word. Not until the week before their wedding. It started quietly. A half-zipped suitcase in the corner of their bedroom. The scent of sealed candles Evan bought for the ceremony. Luca was folding shirts that didn't belong in their honeymoon luggage. He was packing to leave. Evan didn't shout. He simply asked, "Is it cold feet?" Luca shook his head, then handed Evan the phone. There it was, one message. From Miranda. No greeting, no warmth. If you truly love him, let him go. You know he deserves better. You know you're not right for him. You're not what he needs. Luca hadn't replied, but the message burned through the screen like acid. Evan read it 3 times, then he read it again, out loud. The silence afterward wasn't anger, it was heartbreak. Not for himself, but for what it revealed. That the woman who once held his hand across every storm was now trying to sink the ship he had finally found shelter on. That night, Evan didn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling while Luca lay beside him, eyes closed, but breathing like someone holding back tears. By morning, Evan made 2 decisions. He asked Luca to stay, and he removed Miranda from the guest list. No warnings, no explanations, just a clean, hard line between his future and what no longer served it. 3 days later, Evan called his mother and told her what had happened. She was silent for a long time, then whispered, "She just doesn't want to lose you," Evan replied. Then maybe she shouldn't try to destroy the person who found me. But no one expected what came next, because Miranda was never the kind to let go quietly. And on the day Evan stood beside Luca, ready to say the vows they'd written in the early light of so many mornings, Miranda appeared, wearing white, and something far colder than jealousy. Stay with Heart Stories for this unbelievable wedding drama. If you believe that love is worth protecting, no matter who tries to tear it apart, follow us for more. 3 days after Evan made the decision to remove his sister from the guest list, he drove across town to speak with her face to face. He didn't want anger to grow in the silence between them, but what he found behind Miranda's front door was not remorse, it was justification, sharpened and cold. She opened the door without smiling, without even looking surprised. "I knew you'd come," she said, stepping aside. Evan walked in without a word. The living room smelled like lemon cleaner, as if she just wiped away something sticky. There were no photos of Luca anywhere. Not even the save the date card they'd mailed to every relative, with their smiling faces and wedding date embossed in gold. He sat down. Miranda remained standing. "Why did you send him that message?" Evan asked. Miranda crossed her arms. "Because he's not for you. Because I see what you don't. He's changed you." Evan looked up, eyes steady. "Isn't that what love does?" She didn't answer. Instead, she walked to the bookshelf and pulled down a small, dusty frame. It was a photo of Evan as a teenager, laughing beside Miranda at a state fair. She held it like evidence. "You used to talk to me about everything." Before him, Evan exhaled, slow and deliberate. Before him, I was surviving. Now I'm living. Miranda's voice sharpened. He's isolating you. You don't even visit anymore. You've changed. I grew up, Evan replied, and I found someone who doesn't ask me to shrink just to keep the peace. Her face trembled. Just for a moment. You think I'm your enemy. Evan, I'm not. I've always protected you. Always. You don't protect someone by sabotaging their joy. Evan said, you don't get to decide what is good for me by tearing apart the man I love. I was trying to help, she whispered. But it was too late for soft voices. Evan stood up, slow and calm. If you can't respect the person I've chosen to build a life with, you won't be in that life. I'm speaking for both of us now. Luca won't tolerate you anymore, and I won't ask him to. He walked out without waiting for her to respond. As the door clicked shut, Miranda didn't follow. She didn't call, but she didn't disappear either. The next morning, Evan's mother called. She had spoken with Miranda, and she begged Evan to reconsider. She's your only sibling, she said, voice cracking. You two have always been close. Evan felt the familiar ache rise in his chest, the weight of guilt, of family expectations, of that unspoken rule that blood forgives all. But he didn't bend. She tried to break us, he said softly. You want me to invite her to the happiest day of my life. Knowing she tried to end it, his mother cried, said she'd stay out of it. But Evan knew the pressure wouldn't stop there. The night before the wedding, Luca found Evan sitting alone on the back porch. The stars were thick above them. Evan's hands trembled with something he couldn't name. I don't want to lose her, Evan admitted, but I can't keep choosing her over you. Luca sat beside him, pulling Evan's hands into his own. You don't have to choose. Evan, he said gently, you already did. The day you asked me to stay. That night, Evan didn't sleep again. But not because of doubt, because in his heart, he knew peace never came from pleasing everyone. Peace comes when you stop apologizing for the things that make you whole. What Evan didn't know, what no one could have guessed, was that Miranda hadn't given up. She had been quiet, but she was planning her entrance, and it would shake the ceremony to its core. The morning of the wedding arrived with quiet skies. The Vermont air was crisp, and a low fog clung to the trees surrounding the glasshouse venue Evan and Luca had spent months choosing. It wasn't extravagant. It was intimate, a place of light, transparency, and intention. Everything Evan had hoped for. Guests arrived in soft waves, old college friends, aunts from distant coasts, a few co-workers who had watched their love grow over time. The chairs were set, the candles flickered, and at the center of it all stood two men, one in a tailored slate blue suit, the other in ivory with a boutonniere made of clay and rosemary, crafted by hand. They had chosen to write their vows separately, not to keep secrets, but to let the moment feel raw and honest. Luca stood to speak first, but before he could lift the page in his hand, the doors at the end of the aisle creaked open. Gasps followed. A murmur rippled through the rows like wind across water. There she was, Miranda, standing tall in a floor-length white wedding dress, lace sleeves, satin bodice, a small clutch in one hand, and the kind of stillness that doesn't ask for attention, it demands it. Evan's breath caught. Luca didn't move. Neither did the officiant. Miranda stepped onto the aisle without a word. No one stopped her. She walked past cousins who averted their gaze, past aunts who whispered, past her own mother, whose face had already drained of color. When she reached the altar, she didn't look at Luca, she looked at Evan, and then she spoke. I wasn't invited, but I couldn't stay away. Not when you're about to marry a man who lied to you. The silence cracked. I know you think I'm cruel, she said, but I came here for one reason, to tell you the truth before it's too late. From her clutch, she pulled out a photograph one Evan had never seen. In it, a younger Miranda stood beside Luca at a university event, her arms looped around his waist, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. We met in college, she said, raising the photo for all to see. We dated. It wasn't serious, but it was real. Until one day he told me he wasn't interested anymore, that he'd found someone else. I thought it was another girl. She turned to Luca now. But it was you. My brother. Evan couldn't move, his eyes locked on the photo, though his mind scrambled to connect timelines that didn't quite fit. You really think it's a coincidence, Miranda continued? He gets close to me, then disappears. And 5 years later, he shows up in your life. She turned back to the guest now, raising her voice. I'm not here to ruin a wedding. I'm here to stop a mistake. Luca said nothing, and that, more than the photo or the words, made people shift in their seats. Evan looked at him, waiting for a denial, a reaction, anything. But Luca only stood still, jaw clenched, his hand at his side tightening. I never hated you. Evan, Miranda said, her voice trembling now. I hated that you couldn't see what I saw. I hated being the only one who remembered. She turned and walked away, the train of her dress brushing the floor like a final note. Some guests stood, some left. Others remained frozen, unsure what to believe. Luca finally looked at Evan. If you want to ask me, he whispered, I'll tell you the truth. But not here, though. Not like this. Evan stepped back, not away just enough to breathe. The officiant looked at him, waiting. So did everyone else. Evan raised a hand. I need a moment. And he walked away from the altar, not toward his family, not toward Luca, but toward the small garden behind the venue, where silence waited like an old friend. The wedding had stopped. The trust had cracked. And still, in Evan's chest, something refused to break. But outside, a young man with a phone stood beside the bushes, recording everything. And he was about to post a video that would turn this private disaster into a public storm. The wedding didn't resume that afternoon. Guests were offered tea and soft apologies. A few trickled out quietly. Some stayed out of support, others out of curiosity. But the ceremony space remained untouched, like a stage frozen mid-performance. The chairs, the petals, the empty altar, everything held its breath. Evan stayed in the garden for nearly an hour. He sat on a low stone bench beneath a willow tree. His boutonniere wilted slightly from the weight of the moment. He wasn't angry. He wasn't broken. He was waiting for clarity, for time to do what time does. Luca didn't follow him. He knew better than to chase a man sorting through betrayal, or worse, confusion. It was Luca's mother who came instead. She didn't sit. She only placed a folded napkin beside him. Inside it was a pair of cufflinks. Clay, with tiny letters etched in gold. Begin again. He made them the night you said yes, she said quietly. He never told me why he chose those words. Maybe now you understand. And then she walked away. That evening, Evan went home alone. The reception was postponed. The photographer sent a kind message. The cake was boxed and delivered, untouched. By nightfall, the internet had found them. At 9:14 p.m., a video appeared on TikTok. A young content creator who had been invited as a +1, a micro-influencer known for wedding chaos recaps, had captured the entire interruption. Miranda's entrance, her photo, her speech, Luca's silence. The caption read, "Sister crashes gay wedding in white dress and reveals groom dated her first within 4 hours." It had 270,000 views. By morning, it hit 1.2 million. Comment sections exploded. Some called Miranda iconic. Others condemned her cruelty. Speculation ran wild. But then something else surfaced. At 11:06 a.m., a new video went up, this time from an anonymous account with the username @StoneTruths. No caption, no voiceover, just a screen recording. It showed a conversation thread, an email exchange between Miranda and a freelance digital editor. Attached were AI-generated images using old college photos as base templates. Her message read, "Can you make it look like he was touching me affectionately enough to raise eyebrows? It's for family reasons. I'll pay extra." The photo she had waved at the altar fabricated. The entire story manufactured. The truth had arrived, and it did not ask for permission. Within hours, the original viral video was stitched, duetted, and debunked. The backlash was swift and brutal. Miranda's name trended for all the wrong reasons. Her professional accounts were locked, her social media wiped clean, but Evan didn't post anything. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. Because while the internet was tearing down the lie, Evan was quietly rebuilding what mattered. He called Luca that night, asked to meet, just the two of them. They sat on the steps of an empty venue. No suits, no ceremony, just two people, surrounded by silence. Luca didn't speak first. He waited, and Evan said, "I don't need you to explain anything. Not anymore, because I believe you now. Not because of what the internet proved, but because when it mattered, you stayed silent. You didn't defend yourself with noise. You let me feel. You let me decide." Luca blinked once, then twice. Evan took his hand. "And I've decided," he said. "Let's begin again." They didn't reschedule the wedding. They didn't need to, because what came next wasn't performance. It was promise. But just as they turned to leave, a letter arrived in Evan's inbox from someone unexpected. Miranda, and it wasn't an apology. It was something else entirely. The email arrived just after midnight. No subject line, no attachments, just plain text, clean, sharp. It came from Miranda. Evan hesitated before opening it, not because he feared what she would say, but because part of him already knew. People who set fire to things rarely know how to rebuild. The message began without greeting. "I'm not sorry." She didn't try to soften it. She explained that the photo wasn't about revenge. It was about fear. She had spent years watching Evan drift farther away from family gatherings, from shared traditions, from the version of him she thought she knew. She said she felt replaced by someone who had never been invited into their world, but had rewritten it anyway. "I needed you to see what I saw," she wrote, "that not all love is honest, that sometimes we fall in love with a lie." Evan read every word, twice, and then without replying. He archived the message. He didn't need to carry her fear any longer. The next morning, Evan and Luca met with the venue one last time. The flowers had withered. The chairs were stacked. The altar remained untouched. There would be no second wedding. There would be something smaller. They walked out to the lake behind the glass house, where the water held stillness like a secret. Just them. No guests, no speeches. Luca reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded page, the vows he had never read, but Evan stopped him. "I don't need words right now," he said. "Just this." He reached into his own jacket. From an inner pocket, he took out a photo, not the one Miranda had fabricated. A different one, an old family picture, two kids in Halloween costumes, Miranda in a princess dress, Evan in a cardboard robot suit. She was holding his hand. He had folded it, right down the middle. One half remained. He placed it into a small wooden box, then handed it to Luca. "This is what I'm leaving behind," he said, "so we can move forward." Luca didn't speak. He didn't have to. They held hands, spoke their vows without reading them, without rehearsing, and under a gray morning sky, they promised each other something no one could edit, erase, or interrupt. Love, the kind that survives not because it's perfect, but because it's chosen. Again and again. Weeks later, the TikTok videos faded, comments stopped, hashtags disappeared, and the world moved on. But inside a quiet home filled with soft light, two men still chose each other, every morning, every night. And Miranda, no one heard from her again. But Evan never deleted the email. Some stories don't need closure. They need distance. What would you do if someone you love tried to sabotage your happiness? Would you forgive, or would you let them go for good? Let us know in the comments. And if stories like this speak to your heart, don't forget to follow Heart Stories, where real love always has the last word.